Efficiency and leadership likely to dominate the discussions today as Gauteng Judge President Dunstan Mlambo is interviewed for the position of Chief Justice. Mlambo is the head of South Africa's busiest court division. He also leads the judiciary's technology working group. So for more now on his career highlights is Newzroom Afrika's contributor Dianne Hawker. Dianne, actually before we get to today's interviews, you know, it's so refreshing for me to see at least one article this morning. It's on the Daily Maverick's webpage. It's written by Rebecca Davis, and she really calls it like it is when it comes to the interview that we saw yesterday with Mandisa Maya. Rebecca Davis saying there was a relentless focus on her gender and that it was essentially a softball and sexist interview. What do you make of those kinds of comments?
I think that's an accurate assessment, Michelle, because, you know, I was sitting there as a woman watching this interview unfolding. I could actually see her frustration with these repeated questions about gender. And I think one or two questions is probably to be expected. But if the interview starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon you're still answering questions to do with gender and, you know, whether women should be considered or why women are not being considered, I don't think it was a fair line of questioning in terms of the fact that, you know, there are very many factors that are at play, a lot of which are completely out of Justice Maya's control. For example, she was asked about briefing patterns, which is not something that the Chief Justice, if she were to be appointed, is actually capable of resolving. It's more in the scope of you know, legal bodies such as the different bar associations and the attorney's profession to be able to resolve the issue of briefing patterns. Even the Minister of Justice has much more of a role to be able to deal with that issue, as well as Parliament. Incidentally, the Speaker of Parliament is part of this committee, so it would have been more fair, in fact, if they were fielding that kind of a question, but instead turning that question to the candidate who's not there to deal with briefing patterns, but was there to speak as to whether she would be the best candidate for Chief Justice. I think the interview could have really dealt a lot more with her leadership that she's already displayed and that she spoke about at the beginning of the process, Michelle. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, saw a lot of reaction from people who are watching the proceedings, and many women who are watching the proceedings did express their frustration on social media and other platforms about the direction that the interviews had taken.
Yeah, absolutely. She was also visibly frustrated at a number of times, saying, you know, she doesn't speak on behalf of all women. So, Dianne, you know, in that context, how Justice Dunstan Mlambo's interview goes today, I suppose it could be in stark contrast, you know, if we put it against the questions that Justice Maya was asked yesterday versus the questions to be fielded today.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there would likely be some questions about, you know, whether he should be selected over the only woman candidate who is there. I think that we saw Justice Madlanga answering such a question. But I do believe that there will be a significant focus on the work that Judge Mlambo has done over time at the Gauteng High Court. The Gauteng High Court is a very busy division. It actually has two relatively large courts, and it's a court that deals with a significant amount of commercial work, as well as it also deals with a lot of cases against the government, particularly the Pretoria segment of that court. So it is very, very active. It's also a court where we saw some of the judiciary's technological projects kind of piloted. We heard a little bit about the Case Lines project, and that's been used significantly in the Gauteng High Court. Judge Mlambo has been at the forefront of actually making sure that there is some movement when it comes to, you know, moving away from the heavy reliance on paper documents being submitted at the court. I think it was also to benefit that the High Court in Gauteng and in Johannesburg was amongst the first to also start holding online hearings during the COVID-19 pandemic, and subsequent to that we saw other courts also picking that up. So he is considered in the judiciary to be, someone who is very well versed in terms of problems of efficiency as well as possible solutions for those problems, Michelle.
Yeah. There's been some discussion around the benefits of, for example, Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo being the last candidate to be interviewed. His interview is taking place tomorrow. As you see it, Dianne, is there any benefit to candidates going before you and you sort of gleaning what they're saying in their interviews that you could use in your own as one of these 4 candidates?
I think there is a little bit of an advantage that is given, but of course you can never tell what exactly the different commissioners are going to ask. I think it's also important to note that there are also other submissions that the commissioners receive from law bodies, from those who've nominated the candidates, and from just general members of the public, which will also inform the line of questioning in a particular interview. So, for example, yesterday we saw Justice Meyer deal with a question about comments from the Black Law Association. Those questions were not the same as what Justice Madlanga dealt with on Monday. So there definitely is some difference in how the questions are handled. Of course, some of the standard questions about leadership and about efficiency at the court, those are the ones that the questions that those who come later will have a bit of an advantage, having seen what the other candidates have spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely. Dianne Hawker, thanks so much for that update. Newzroom Afrika contributor in Sandton for us for this process of interviews to appoint the next Chief Justice in the country. And of course, Gauteng Judge President Dunstan Mlambo is being interviewed from this morning.